Hey guys, and welcome back to Hoosier Hardware, and today we're going to be talking about the Xbox Series X, which we now have basically a full spec sheet on that particular console that's supposed to be launching around holidays of this year, so the end of the year. So obviously we're still a long ways out, but it is looking like it's going to be a good system, and I just want to mention here, I really wish it was a PC. Let me explain. So for those of you that have not been following the Xbox leaks, and now of course we now have these specs for it, what we're working with here is 8 Zen 2 CPU cores, and then we're gonna have a roughly 12 teraflop GPU. We're gonna get 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory. We're getting a 1 terabyte SSD. I believe that's NVMe custom based though, so it's not like a M.2 drive that you can just slot in there, but it is NVMe based, so it should be in great shape there from a speed perspective on the SSD, and it just overall looks like it's going to be a really good system. And I can't help but feel like this could be an excellent pre-built small form factor PC. So I'll go ahead and link in the description down below the Digital Foundry sort of deep dive into those specs, but they have a lot of interesting information. For example, the 8 Zen 2 cores do feature SMT, though that can be turned either on or off by the developers of specific games. In fact, they mentioned that a lot of the launch titles will likely just leave that off because it makes porting a little bit easier apparently. So with it off though, we will feature 8 cores running at a slightly higher clock speed than if SMT was actually put on, though as games do become better and better at taking advantage of lots of threads, obviously it looks like developers will probably be able to harness a little bit more power by turning SMT on. And with the new generation games, especially once we reach the point that these games will be exclusive to the new generation of consoles, that will likely start to take hold there, which actually does benefit PC gamers as well, because we've had lots of cores and lots of threads for a while now, and now that game developers will be hopefully coding for that specifically on the console side, hopefully that then translates also to the PC side. Then the GPU in the Series X is also no joke, featuring 12 teraflops of raw performance. And yes, it's hard to really compare that with real world examples, especially when we see things like the Vega 64 had a big number when you're talking about teraflops, but actual gaming performance was quite different. So this is an apples to oranges type of scenario. You can't really compare 12 teraflops directly to NVIDIA's cards, because ultimately a teraflop on an NVIDIA card results in different gaming performance than 1 teraflop on what will be the RDNA 2 architecture, but still it should be a very strong GPU, and yeah, it's looking like a great spec sheet for the console. Now, where in my mind Microsoft has an advantage over Sony is the fact that they're also the developers to the Windows operating system, and just looking at the console and comparing it to something like the Corsair One, where you have a small form factor PC, it looks to me like the Xbox Series X would actually make a great pre-built desktop PC geared towards gamers, especially if the price that a lot of people are sort of starting to kick out there of $600 or $700 holds true. That would undercut a lot of PCs that are occupying this space as being that sort of upper end gaming rig, because frankly, this is an upper end console. This is a high end gaming PC just running a console operating system. The hardware in the Xbox Series X is high-end stuff. We get a lot of storage at a very fast speed. We get a very powerful GPU with a very powerful CPU, and it's not like the clock speeds advertised by Microsoft are really low like we've seen on consoles in the past. We're actually seeing these Zen 2 cores on the CPU side, for instance, running up kind of close to 4 gigahertz. Now, obviously, if you're running a Zen 2 based CPU, you can push that on well past the 4 gigahertz mark, but we're not seeing something ultra low on the clock speed side like 2.3 gigahertz or 2.5 gigahertz or low 2s. We're actually seeing something somewhat close to the PC spec, especially once you don't factor in overclocks and precision boost overdrive, which again, the Xbox Series X is actually going to be running at locked clock speeds, so you're not going to see things like thermal throttling, or at least you shouldn't see things like thermal throttling, though hopefully that does exist in case you get your fan completely clogged up or broken. Hopefully this thing doesn't just bake itself, but in normal operation you should see these clock speeds as advertised being locked in place by Microsoft. And yes, I do do fully understand that if we ran this as a gaming PC and actually installed Windows on it or had Windows pre-installed on it, or maybe there was just a Windows version of the Xbox Series X, I do fully understand that things would not be very modular in a system like this. Whereas with the Corsair One, you can actually swap out quite a lot of the components. In fact, I think you can pretty much swap everything in that system out aside from your coolers that eventually, if they get sort of clogged up or broken, it's going to be hard to find replacement coolers for that since they are custom AIOs. But you would trade that off by getting a great gaming PC today that's going to also last for a significant period of time. It's not like high-end gaming components are suddenly obsolete a year from now. In fact, if you look over my shoulder here, I'm still rocking a GTX 1080 Ti, and it still does an excellent job in gaming in 2020. And I've had this thing for a couple of years now, so it's not like high-end gear goes out of fashion immediately. Now, I actually ran a YouTube community poll, and I think it's actually still available, but right now, people seem to want to pay for an Xbox Series X, at least for my channel, and my viewership is mostly PC gamers, so this is going to be a little bit skewed from the average consumer, but people want to pay $600 or less by and large. Either that or 3 rolls of toilet paper seems to be an acceptable cost for this console as well. I'd be curious if this was an actual gaming PC. What would you be willing to pay for a pre-built with no upgradability outside of the storage, which they do have those expandable storage cards that Microsoft is going to offer, but outside of that, nothing is really upgradable in this system? What would you be willing to pay for a system like that, though, with the specs that this system is going to have if it was just a regular PC? Now, the last thing I do want to leave you with is this PC part picker list that I put together to at least somewhat closely mimic the spec sheet from the Xbox Series X. Now, things like memory are not perfectly replicable because you can't, at least right now on a desktop platform, pair GDDR6 memory with a CPU. That's not the way it works. We're working with DDR4 there. So we do have 8 gigabytes of DDR4 memory combined with the 8 gigabyte GPU. That gets us to the 16 gigabytes that the spec sheet is featuring for the Xbox Series X. That's why I didn't feature 16 gigabytes of system memory because that's not the way the Series X works either. But we do have a roughly equivalent-ish CPU here. We have the Ryzen 3700X, which is 8 Zen cores. You can turn SMT on or off. Obviously, the 3700X will clock higher than the Xbox Series X. And then I did feature AMD's current flagship GPU, the 5700 XT, though it does look like right now, at least, that the Xbox Series X will actually feature a better GPU than currently what AMD has on offer from the 5700 XT. So it's hard to say exactly how apples to apples or apples to oranges this ends up being. Obviously, PC and console comparisons are always apples to oranges because of the software side of things and the fact that, again, the hardware cannot be perfectly mimicked. But this PC right now, if you were building it today, would cost nearly $1,000. Now, I didn't get the cheapest everything. Like, I could have gotten an A320 motherboard and saved a little bit of money there. I could have gotten a super cheap PC case if I wanted and saved a little bit more money there. But my point with this is that the raw specs actually would seem to indicate that the price tag is going to be significant for the Series X, especially when you consider things like RAM, SSDs. Those are not expected to get any cheaper throughout 2020. They're probably right now about as cheap as they're going to be this year, and I would actually kind of expect those things to get slightly more expensive as the year wears on. And I think that might be part of the reason that Microsoft has not announced pricing for the Series X, is it's probably just too far out right now for them to know exactly what they want to price it at. Now, the good thing with something like the Series X is that console makers generally don't keep a big chunk of profit for the hardware at launch. Now, down the road, they might start making a little bit more profit for each system they're selling, but at launch, they typically either make very little profit or even actually take a small hit on the hardware they're selling, with the goal being, obviously, get people on the platform. So this would be a compelling PC if it featured the Windows operating system, or if Microsoft maybe even offered it as a separate, even if they charge like a $50 or $100 premium on a $700 console, for instance. An $800 PC at that form factor would be a pretty cool little idea. But of course, all this is wishful thinking. I absolutely do not expect Microsoft to give anyone the option of running Windows on their Microsoft Series X. In fact, I'm sure they're going to lock that down. I'm sure there will be hackers that try, or people that try to hack into the system firmware and get things changed, up and running, whatever. But I don't see it happening. And even if it does happen, it might be a situation like Android running on a Nintendo Switch, where yes, technically you can get it up and running, but the experience isn't any good. I really wish they would. I think it would really help sort of blend the Xbox together with Windows, but I just don't see Microsoft doing that. Yeah. It's a sad thing. But of course, those are just my thoughts on the matter. I do want to hear from you guys. Would you like to see the Xbox Series X be available to run Windows as its operating system, effectively turning it into a gaming PC with that hardware? Or do you feel like it's not that great hardware and maybe you would just rather build yourself? I know that most of the people that watch my channel are a little bit more comfortable with the idea of building a PC themselves, but do you see some merit or some value into selling it as possibly a Windows machine as well? Let me know all your thoughts on the matter down below. And of course, if you like this video, give it a like, share, subscribe, comment. All those things are helpful to the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.